My 5-year-old daughter was lying in a hospital bed, tiny and still, with tubes running into her arms and a monitor beeping beside her. Just 2 hours before, she'd been laughing, drawing happy rainbows with chalk. Now, she was in a coma. Because of our HOA president. Before watching full story, comment below from where you're watching. Also, like and subscribe for more stories. Her name, Karen Whitaker. If you think you've heard about bad Karens before, multiply that by 10. Give her a gavel, and put her in charge of every petty rule in the neighborhood. She didn't just enforce the HOA regulations, she lived for them, twisted them, and used them to make life miserable for anyone who dared to smile in their own yard. But this time, she went too far. She laid her hands on my little girl. She shoved her so hard, my daughter hit her head on the edge of our garden border. And when I confronted her, she looked me dead in the eyes with a smirk that said, "What are you going to do about it?" The thing is, I'm a district attorney. I do things about it, at least. I thought I could. What I didn't realize then was that this wasn't going to be a quick fight. This was the start of a war, one that would pit me, my daughter, and every terrified neighbor on our street against a woman who believed she was untouchable. That morning had started so perfectly, it almost felt like a postcard. The air was crisp with the scent of freshly cut grass, and sunlight spilled across our driveway like liquid gold. My daughter, Lily, was sitting cross-legged near the garage with a bucket of sidewalk chalk in every color you could imagine. She'd been working for nearly an hour, her tiny hands smudged with pinks, yellows, and blues. She drew looping rainbows, flowers taller than herself, and smiling suns. Every now and then, she'd hum a tune from her favorite cartoon. Her blonde curls glowed in the light, and her blue eyes lit up every time she stepped back to admire her work. I was inside making coffee, enjoying the quiet, when a sound cut through the morning sharp, angry, and ugly. It was Karen. "This is against the rules," she barked, her voice dripping with authority she thought she actually had. I moved to the window. There she was, the self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac, dressed in a pressed beige pantsuit like she was about to host a corporate board meeting instead of going for a walk. Her silver-gray bob was perfectly in place, and her lips were twisted into that sour look she wore whenever she spotted someone breaking a rule. "You can't draw on the driveway. This is vandalism," she spat, towering over Lily. Lily looked up, startled. "But Daddy said I could," she said in her small, trembling voice. Her bottom lip wobbled. Karen's response was ice-cold. "I don't care what your father said. The HOA rules are clear. No chalk drawings on driveways. You're making the neighborhood look trashy." And then she grabbed my little girl by the arm. Not gently, not with care. She yanked her away from her own art, causing Lily to stumble. The chalk dropped to the pavement, snapping in two. I was already halfway out the door. "Get your hands off my daughter," I yelled, my heart pounding in my ears. Karen turned toward me slowly, her expression unchanged, as if I were the one overreacting. "Your child is damaging HOA property," she said flatly. "And as president, I'm obligated to take action. You'll be getting a fine." "She's 5 years old, Karen. It's chalk. It'll wash away with the next rain." Her lips curved upward into a smile, but it wasn't friendly. "Rules are rules, Michael, and I'll make sure the board knows you can't control your child." I picked Lily up, holding her close. She was shaking now, tears starting to spill down her cheeks. Karen turned on her heel and walked away like nothing had happened. But I caught the glance she threw over her shoulder, the kind that promised this wasn't over. Seen the worst of her that morning. I was wrong. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She kept glancing toward her bedroom window, clutching her stuffed bunny, and whispering, "Daddy, will the mean lady come back?" I told her no. I told her everything was fine. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew Karen wasn't the type to just let things go. And I was right. It started small. A slip of paper in my mailbox the next morning, a $50 fine for overgrown grass. I pulled out a tape measure. It was half an inch taller than the HOA standard, half an inch. 2 days later, another fine, $100. This time, reason: child's toy left in yard overnight. The toy was a small rubber ball Lily had forgotten under the porch steps. The week after that, $75 for faded paint on mailbox. My mailbox looked fine, but I repainted it anyway, just to avoid another ticket. It was obvious what she was doing. She'd decided to make my life miserable, one citation at a time. I started talking to neighbors. I figured maybe it was just me she had a vendetta against, but I was wrong. Mrs. Chin, who lived next door, lowered her voice when I asked. "She fined me $300 last month," she whispered. "Said my roses were the wrong color. Pink isn't allowed, apparently." Down the street, Mr. Rodriguez shook his head. "She made me cut down my fruit tree," he said bitterly. "Said it was too tall. That tree took me 5 years to grow." Everyone had a Karen story, and they all ended the same way, with people paying up or caving in because they were too scared to fight her. Well, I wasn't scared. I was a district attorney. I fought bullies for a living. I started keeping records. I took photos of my yard every single day. I kept every fine letter. I even began a logbook, noting every time she walked by our house, how long she stayed, and whether she spoke to anyone. Still, I made a mistake. I thought this was just about harassment. I thought if I gathered enough proof, I could embarrass her at an HOA meeting or take her to small claims court. But I underestimated her. Karen wasn't just petty. She was dangerous, and I found that out the hard way. One Tuesday afternoon, when I was stuck in court and my phone rang with a call that would make my blood run cold. That Tuesday started like any other workday. I was in court, cross-examining a witness in a robbery trial. My phone was on silent, tucked in my suit pocket. When the recess came, I glanced at the screen. 7 missed calls from Sarah, our babysitter. The 8th call came in before I could even process it. I answered instantly. Her voice was shaking. Mr. Dawson, something terrible happened. What's wrong? Is Lily okay? I think you should come home. She's hurt. Really badly. My chest tightened. Tell me exactly. What happened? Sarah's breathing was fast and uneven. We were in the backyard. Lily was blowing soap bubbles. She loves chasing them, you know. The wind carried a few over the fence into other yards. She was laughing. But then, her voice cracked. Then Karen showed up. I gripped the phone harder. Karen came into our yard. She just barged in, yelling that the bubbles were a violation, that they counted as littering. Lily didn't even understand. She just kept playing. That made Karen angrier. My stomach dropped. What did she do? She grabbed Lily by the arms. She shook her and called her a bad girl. Then she shoved her hard. Sarah's words broke into sobs. She hit her head on the stone border around your flower garden. There was blood, so much blood. She wouldn't wake up. I didn't even remember ending the call. I just ran, out of the courthouse, into my car, speeding like my life depended on it. The 20-minute drive to the hospital felt like hours. When I finally reached the ER, I spotted Sarah in the waiting room, pale and trembling. She tried to explain more, but all I could focus on was finding my daughter. Dr. Martinez met me outside the trauma room. His face was grave. Your daughter has a serious brain injury, he said. The fall caused significant swelling. She's in a coma. The word hit me like a punch to the chest. How long? How long until she wakes up? He hesitated. We don't know. It could be days, weeks, or longer. And I have to be honest. They don't wake up at all. My knees felt weak. I pushed past him into the room. Lily lay there, so small on the hospital bed. Her blonde curls were matted with dried blood, her skin pale against the white sheets. Machines beeped steadily beside her, each sound both a comfort and a torment. I took her hand. I'm here, sweetheart, Daddy's here. My throat burned, but I forced my voice to stay steady. I'm going to fix this, I promise. But fixing it wasn't going to be as simple as I thought, because that night, when I went to the police to report Karen for assault, they didn't rush to arrest her. In fact, they seemed more interested in protecting her than protecting my daughter. The fluorescent lights in the police station made everything feel cold and impersonal. I sat across from Officer Williams, my hands gripping the edge of the desk as I laid out what happened. I want to press charges against Karen Whitaker for assault, I said, my voice tight. My babysitter saw the entire thing. My daughter is 5 years old. She's in a coma. Williams nodded slowly, scribbling something in his notebook. I understand you're upset, Mr. Dawson, but Mrs. Whitaker claims it was an accident. She says Lily tripped and fell. That's a lie, I snapped. Sarah saw her push my daughter. She grabbed her first. Williams shifted uncomfortably. Karen's saying your babysitter is making this up to cover her own negligence, that she wasn't watching Lily closely enough. I stared at him in disbelief. My babysitter is 20 years old, studying to be a teacher, and adores my daughter. She would never hurt her, and she was right there. She saw it happen. He closed his notebook. We'll need more evidence. Before we can move forward, you know how it works. Mrs. Whitaker's been the HOA president here for 10 years. She's respected in the community. She's got friends on the force. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a straight path to justice. I stood. Fine, you want more evidence. I'll get it. But when I do, I don't want to hear a single excuse about why you can't arrest her. On my way out, I caught a glimpse of the front desk officer chatting with someone, laughing, leaning in close. It was Karen. She turned her head just enough to smirk at me, the same way she had after shoving my little girl. I walked past her without a word, but in my mind, the decision was made. If the police wouldn't protect my daughter, I would. If Karen thought she was untouchable, I'd prove her wrong. I'd been building cases for years as a district attorney. I knew how to gather evidence. I knew how to dismantle a liar's story piece by piece. Karen wasn't just another neighbor. Anymore, she was a criminal, and I was going to treat her like one. The very next morning, I got to work. If Karen wanted to play games, I was going to play chess, 10 moves ahead. First, I installed security cameras. Not the obvious ones that could be avoided. These were small, hidden in the branches of my trees. Tucked under the eaves of the roof, and angled to cover every corner of my property. If she stepped within 10 feet of my yard again, I'd have her on video. Second, I started digging into her past. My access to public records gave me an edge most people didn't have. It didn't take long to see a pattern. Karen had lived in 4 different neighborhoods in the last 15 years, and in every single one, she had been the HOA president. In every single one, neighbors had filed complaints, harassment, excessive fines, trespassing. But somehow, the cases always went nowhere. Then I found something darker. In her last neighborhood, a man named Frank Peterson had filed a police report claiming Karen poisoned his dog because it barked too much. The dog died a week later. There wasn't enough evidence to convict her, but Frank moved away shortly after. Another case, a woman named Susan Mills. She had a prize-winning rose garden. One night, every plant was dead, the soil reeking of weed killer. Susan swore she'd seen Karen near her garden hours before, but again, no proof. Karen wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a serial bully. She thrived on control and intimidation, and every time people had gotten close to holding her accountable, she slipped away. Not this time. While I dug into her history, I also started working on her head. Every few days, I slipped a typed note into her mailbox. No fingerprints, no handwriting, just short, sharp sentences. I know what you did. You can't hide forever. Justice is coming. From my living room window, I watched her read them the first time. She looked around sharply before crumpling it up. The second time, she hesitated before even opening her mailbox, glancing over her shoulder. By the third note, she was visibly rattled, locking her door twice every time she came home. Meanwhile, I spent every spare moment at the hospital. I read Lily her favorite bedtime stories, even though her eyes stayed closed. I told her about the silly birds that perched outside her window, about how the nurses decorated her for pole with stickers, and I promised her out loud, every single day, that I would make the bad lady go away. I didn't know how much she could hear, but I needed her to know I was fighting, and I was about to get my first real break in the case. One that would prove Karen's attack wasn't some accident at all. It came from the last person. I expected my neighbor across the street. Tim Bradley. Tim was a quiet guy, a freelance programmer who worked from home. We'd waved to each other 100 times, but never had a real conversation. One evening, he called me. "Michael, I heard about Lily," he said. "I'm so sorry. I think I might have something that could help." I straightened in my chair. "What is it?" "I've got security cameras on my house too. They cover the street." I checked the footage from that day, the day she got hurt. My pulse quickened. "Did you see the attack?" "Not the actual shove," he admitted. "Your fence blocks the view into your yard." "But I saw Karen." That alone made my stomach knot. "What exactly did you see?" Tim's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "She parked across from your house at 2:15 p.m., just sat in her car for almost an hour, staring at your property. At 3:10, she got out and walked straight toward your backyard. 15 minutes later, she came running back to her car and took off." It hit me like a freight train. This wasn't a spur moment outburst. She had been planning it. Tim sent me the footage, and I watched it over and over. The way she sat there, her hands tight on the steering wheel, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror, then the purposeful stride toward my yard, and finally, the quick retreat. It was the first piece of the puzzle that proved intent, but it wasn't enough. So I started knocking on doors, asking anyone if they'd seen or heard anything unusual that afternoon. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman, who lived behind me, I was in my kitchen, making tea, she said. I heard a woman shouting, really angry. Then I heard a child crying. And then, silence. "Did you see who it was?" I asked. "Not clearly, your fence is too tall." But a few minutes later, I saw a woman walking quickly through the alley behind your house. Gray hair, expensive clothes, looked just like that HOA lady. That added another layer. Next, I went back to Dr. Martinez and asked him directly, could these injuries have been caused by a simple fall? He shook his head. Not likely. The bruising on her arms and shoulders is consistent with being grabbed forcefully before falling. This wasn't just a trip, someone pushed her. Then, I got my biggest break yet, from an 8-year-old. Carmen Rodriguez, 2 houses down, had seen the whole thing from her bedroom window. Her mother brought her over one evening, saying she'd been having nightmares. Carmen was shy, but her words were clear. "The mean lady came into your yard. She yelled at Lily. Then she grabbed her and shook her. And then, she pushed her. Lily fell and hit her head. There was blood. The lady looked around, and then ran away. That was it. I had an eyewitness, medical proof, a timeline, and video evidence of her planning it. And soon, I'd have even more, because Karen's crimes didn't stop at assault. While the assault case against Karen was building, I decided to dig into a different angle, one that might make it impossible for her to wriggle out of trouble. The HOA's finances. As president, Karen had access to every dollar collected from the neighborhood. Maintenance fees, landscaping budgets, repair funds. I filed a public records request to see the HOA's expenses for the past 3 years. When the packet arrived, I sat down at my desk and began going through each page, line by line. It didn't take long for something to jump out. There were multiple invoices from a company called Willow Creek Services. Landscaping, maintenance, even pest control. Thousands of dollars paid out every few months. But here's the thing, Willow Creek Services didn't exist. A quick business registry search showed no company by that name in our state. No physical address, no phone number, nothing. So I dug deeper. I checked the bank account listed on the payments. The account holder's name, Karen Whitaker. Over the course of 3 years, she'd funneled nearly $50,000 from the HOA budget into her personal account, all under the guise of paying a fake company for services never rendered. Embezzlement, plain and simple. This was huge. Even if she somehow dodged the assault charge, this was the kind of crime that would stick. And better yet, it showed a pattern. She was not just a bully, she was a thief. Someone willing to manipulate, lie, and steal for personal gain. Still, I wasn't ready to move just yet. The more evidence I had on the assault, the stronger my case would be when paired with the financial crimes. I wanted the police to have no excuse, no wiggle room, no we need more stall tactics. Gathering. Every day, I visited Lily in the hospital, whispering updates like bedtime stories. Daddy's finding proof. Sweetheart, I'm getting closer. I'm going to make her pay. And the day finally came when the evidence against Karen was too strong for even her friends in the police department to ignore. It was time to take her down. When I called the police this time, I wasn't empty-handed. I had the timeline video from Tim, the eyewitness testimony from Carmen, Mrs. Patterson's corroboration, Dr. Martinez's medical assessment, and the HOA financial records proving $50,000 in embezzlement. I didn't just walk into the station, I walked into the district attorney's office. Being a DA had its perks, and this was one of them. I sat down with Detective Sarah Kim, a seasoned investigator who had handled crimes against children for over a decade. She flipped through my file for 15 minutes without saying a word. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sharp. This, she said, tapping the stack, is a strong case. We have enough to arrest her today. It felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd taken since Lily's attack. That afternoon, I stood at my living room window and watched as 2 police cruisers and an unmarked car pulled up in front of Karen's pristine, HOA-approved home. Detective Kim led the way to the door. Karen opened it with that same haughty posture she always had, chin lifted, eyes scanning for someone to intimidate. This is harassment, she began immediately. I'm being targeted because I enforce community standards, ma'am. Detective Kim interrupted calmly. You're under arrest for aggravated assault on a child and embezzlement. For the first time, I saw real fear on Karen's face. This is ridiculous. That child fell. It was an accident. We have witnesses who say otherwise. Kim recited her rights as another officer cuffed her hands behind her back as they walked her to the car. She looked straight at my window, her expression twisted into a glare so venomous I could feel it from across the street. But I didn't flinch. She knew this was my doing, and I didn't care. The trial began 3 months later. By then, Lily had woken up, but the doctors warned she might suffer from headaches, memory issues, and lingering trauma. She still didn't like playing outside alone. In court, Karen's defense tried to spin her as a respected leader, a victim of a vendetta. But the evidence was a tidal wave. Carmen testified, her small voice steady as she described what she saw. Tim played the video showing Karen waiting in her car for an hour before approaching my house. Mrs. Patterson told the jury about the angry yelling and the sudden silence. Dr. Martinez explained exactly why Lily's injuries couldn't have been from a simple fall, and when the prosecution turned to the embezzlement charges, I laid out the bank statements, fake invoices, and direct transfers in black and white. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. When the judge sentenced Karen to 15 years in prison, she erupted in the courtroom, shouting, swearing, claiming conspiracy. Her voice was still ringing in my ears as the deputies led her away. But as far as I was concerned, justice had finally been served out, or so I thought. 6 months after Karen was locked away, I thought the nightmare was over. The neighborhood was calmer. The fines had stopped, and Lily had started smiling more. She still wasn't quite her old self, but she was laughing again, and that was enough for me. Then my phone rang. It was Detective Kim. Michael, she said, her voice low. I have some news about Karen Whitaker. She's been making calls from prison. I felt my stomach drop. What kind of calls? She's been speaking to her sister Janet Whitaker. We've been monitoring the calls because Karen's considered high risk. In multiple conversations, she's asked Janet to take care of unfinished business. Unfinished business. I repeated, we think she means you. And Lily, my blood went cold. Kim continued. Janet has a criminal record. Assault, vandalism, stalking. She's cut from the same cloth as her sister. We're issuing a restraining order immediately. She can't come within 500 feet of your home, your work, or Lily's school. That night, I installed more security cameras, not just around the house, but covering the entire street. I changed every lock in the house. I even hired a private security firm to do random patrols in our neighborhood. 3 days later, the trouble started. Mrs. Chin called me in the middle of the day. "Michael, there's a strange woman outside your house. She's taking pictures, writing things down." I left work immediately. When I pulled onto my street, I saw her. She looked eerily like Karen, same gray hair, same self-satisfied smirk, same designer-style clothes. I stepped out of my car. "Can I help you with something?" She turned, narrowing her eyes. "You're Michael Dawson, aren't you?" "Yes, and you are." "Janet Whitaker, Karen's sister." My jaw tightened. "You're violating a restraining order." She smiled, a cold, calculated expression that sent a chill through me. "I'm on a public sidewalk. Perfectly legal. You need to leave. Now, my sister told me everything about you," she said. "How you ruined her life over a little accident. How you turned the neighborhood against her. She put my daughter in a coma." I shot back. Janet's eyes glittered. "Accidents happen, but you're going to pay for what you did." I reached for my phone. "I'm calling the police." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Go ahead. I haven't done anything wrong yet." Then, she turned and walked away, as casually as if we'd been talking about the weather. But I knew this wasn't over. From that day on, I knew I had to treat Janet like Karen, as a constant threat. And just like with her sister, I started preparing. I had my new cameras cover every angle of the street, not just my yard. I hired a private investigator to follow her, document her movements, and see if she was violating the restraining order in subtle ways. I even started carrying a small voice recorder in my pocket at all times, just in case she decided to cross the line. It didn't take long. One evening, I pulled into my driveway after work and spotted her leaning against a utility pole across the street. "Nice car damage," she called out, smirking. My stomach sank. I'd found fresh scratches on my car 2 days earlier, deep gouges running along both sides. I clicked on the recorder in my pocket. "Are you admitting you did that?" "I'm not admitting anything," she said with mock innocence. "Just saying, karma's _." I stepped closer. "You need to stay away from me and my family." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Your daughter ruined my sister's life. Karen was a respected leader until you dragged her name through the mud." "Karen put my 5-year-old in a coma," I said, my voice low. "That's not leadership. That's assault." "That was an accident," she snapped. "But you had to play the victim. You had to destroy her." "Well, I'm not letting it go." Her tone shifted, the sneer disappearing into something far darker. "You're going to pay for what you did, both you and your brat daughter." That was it. The threat I needed. I didn't respond. I just let the silence hang for a beat before pulling out my phone. "Thanks, Janet, you've said enough." An hour later, I was sitting in Detective Kim's office, playing the recording. She didn't even wait for it to finish. That's enough for an arrest. Threatening a child is a serious felony. That night, police knocked on Janet's hotel door. She screamed and fought as they cuffed her, just like her sister had months earlier. "This is harassment," she yelled. "You have the right to remain silent." The arresting officer replied, his voice calm. Janet was charged with criminal threats, stalking, and violating a restraining order. The judge denied her bail, labeling her a danger to the community. At her trial, I testified about the harassment and the threat she made against Lily. The jury didn't take long. She was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. When they led her away, she turned to glare at me. The same look Karen had given me and mouthed the words, "This isn't over." But this time, I didn't feel a shred of fear. With Janet gone, it was like the last shadow over our street finally lifted. For the first time in years, our neighborhood felt free. Kids played basketball in driveways without parents glancing nervously over their shoulders. Sidewalk chalk bloomed across the pavement in every color of the rainbow. Families lingered outside, chatting and laughing long after sunset. One sunny Saturday, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching Lily draw a giant rainbow across our driveway. She was humming softly, her blonde curls bouncing as she moved. From color to color, Mrs. Chin walked over with her granddaughter, smiling wider than I'd ever seen. "Mr. Dawson," she said warmly, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For standing up to the Whitaker sisters. Before you fought them, we were all too scared to live our lives. Now our children can play freely. We can plant the flowers we want. We can finally breathe." I looked around. She was right. Mr. Rodriguez had planted a new fruit tree. The Patel family had put up a basketball hoop in their driveway. People were working in their gardens. Kids were riding bikes. And for the first time in years, no one was looking over their shoulder for a clipboard and a fine. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked at me with those big blue eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "I'm not scared anymore." I brushed her hair back from her forehead. "Good, sweetheart. You never have to be scared again. Will you always protect me?" she asked. "Always and forever," I said without hesitation. She smiled, closed her eyes, and drifted to sleep. I stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe. All the fights, the evidence gathering, the late nights, it had all been worth it. The Whitakers had tried to break us, but all they'd done was make us stronger. From then on, our neighborhood became known as one of the friendliest communities. In the city, property values went up, not because of Karen's rigid standards, but because families wanted to live somewhere safe, somewhere where neighbors actually cared about each other. The HOA elected new leadership, people who focused on real improvements instead of weaponizing rules. And in a gesture that nearly brought me to tears, they renamed the small park at the end of our street Lily's Garden. It had colorful flower beds, a playground, and a little plaque that read, "In honor of childhood innocence, and the courage to protect it." Every year on the anniversary of the attack, Lily and I visit that park together. She always brings a bucket of chalk and decorates the sidewalks with rainbows just like she did the morning Karen decided to make her an enemy. But now, no one dares stop her. Years passed. Lily grew taller, stronger, and more confident. The shy, quiet little girl who once clung to my leg at the sight of a stranger became a young woman with a voice that could silence a room. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she would ask about those dark days. "Daddy," she'd say, "why did those women hate us so much?" I'd take a deep breath before answering. Some people carry so much anger inside them that they have to spill it on others. It makes them feel powerful. But power built on fear never lasts. "And you stopped them." She'd say no. I'd correct her gently. "We stopped them. You were brave enough to tell the truth, even when it was scary. That's what heroes do." By the time Lily finished college, she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She applied to law school and specialized in protecting children from abuse and bullying. "I want to help kids the way I was helped," she told me on the day she passed the bar exam. I'd never been prouder. Karen Whitaker never got out of prison. She died 5 years into her sentence from a heart attack. I felt nothing. The world was safer without her. Janet served her full 3 years, moved to another state, and vanished from our lives. I think she finally understood that the Dawson family wasn't going to be intimidated. Our street flourished. New families moved in, drawn by the warmth and sense of safety. The HOA stayed focused on real community needs, fixing sidewalks, organizing events, maintaining the park, not nitpicking every lawn blade. And Lily's Garden became the heart of it all. Kids laughed on the swings, parents picnicked under the shade trees, and the flower beds bloomed in colors Karen would have hated. Every year on the anniversary of the attack, Lily and I still visit. She brings a bucket of chalk, kneels on the sidewalk, and starts drawing rainbows. Neighbors stop to watch, smiling as they remember what those drawings symbolize. Not just childhood joy, but resilience. One year, as she was finishing a rainbow, she stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans, and said, "This one's for all the kids who should be able to play without fear." I just stood there, my chest tight with pride, because I realized something: the Whitakers hadn't destroyed us. They'd forged us into something stronger. We had faced cruelty head-on and turned it into a reason to fight for something better. And maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes the smallest act, a little girl refusing to stop blowing bubbles, or a father refusing to stay silent, can ripple out into something that changes an entire community. In the end, justice had been served. Love had outlasted hate, and my little girl, once a victim, had grown into the kind of woman who made sure no other child in her care would ever have to face a Karen alone. Forever and always, just like I promised.